This is the Chamber Chat Podcast, the show dedicated to chamber professionals to spark ideas and to get actionable tips and strategies to better serve your members and community. Hello, Chamber Champions. Welcome to Chamber Chat Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Burton, and it's my goal here on the podcast to introduce you to people and ideas to better help you serve your chamber members and your community. Our title sponsor for this episode is Bringing Local Back. Remember when your community could turn to a local TV station or newspaper for the latest updates and affordable ads? Those days may be fading, but the need for local connection remains. That's why we created Bringing Local Back, a game-changing platform that restores local visibility and advertising power to your community. It's more than just tech. It's about driving engagement and creating new revenue for your chamber. Ready to see the future? Visit bringinglocalback.com to schedule your demo today. This is the future of local commerce. Our guest for this episode is Carl Blackstone. Carl has a deep knowledge of working with small and large businesses as well as professional trade associations on local, state, and federal levels. Carl has served as the former manager of the state government relations for the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce and as a district field manager for Mark Sanford when he served in the U.S. House Senate Representative, in addition to other community roles. Currently, he serves on the board of the Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives and the South Carolina State Chamber of Commerce. As the president and CEO of the Columbia Chamber, Carl's focus is creating a strategy to help make the region more competitive for the next 20 years. But Carl, I'm excited to have you with us today here on Chamber Chat Podcast. I'd love to give you an opportunity to say hello to all the chamber champions who are out there listening and to share something interesting about yourself so we can all get to know you a little better.
Well, greetings and from South Carolina. Great to be with you today, and thanks so much for having me. This chamber world is so small. I've met so many folks from around the country that are in chambers. So I haven't met you. I apologize, but look forward to one day. But I'm just a boring guy from the Southeast. I got 4 daughters. They're in college, and so I'll be working forever. But I love what I do, and I'm enjoying it very much. But otherwise, I'm just a boring guy.
A boring guy. Yeah, I've got 3 daughters myself, so
Okay.
son and 3 daughters, so I can sympathize with you a little bit. It's great, but yeah, we'll be working a long time.
Okay.
That's right. Well, Carl, tell us a little bit about the Columbia Chamber. Give us an idea of the size, staff, budget, scope of work to kind of set the stage for our discussion.
So we've been around. We were founded in 1902. And so we've been around for 125 years or so. We're a mid-sized chamber. We've got a staff of about 15. We've got a budget, a little $2.5 million, and about 1,300 partners under the umbrella. Columbia as a whole is capital city. It's smack dab in the middle of the great state of South Carolina. Metropolitan area is around a little less than 1 million people. It's because it's a state government town, capital city. We got the University of South Carolina 2 blocks from my office. It's been somewhat of a different place for businesses because everybody knows it's a government town, and the government mentality has been very strong here for years. And so when I've been here for 10 years as the CEO, didn't grow up through chambers. I worked at the state chamber and did lobbying work for the state chamber years ago, but I didn't really understand chambers. And that was a state chamber, not a local chamber. And so when I found myself in this position, I'm like, holy cow, it's a new world. And I've learned a ton. But the hardest thing we've had to do is really change the mentality of Columbia businesses. Say, yes, we are a government town. That is a positive. That is a wonderful thing. Great attributes to have for recruiting businesses. But that's not the only thing we are. We have great companies here. We need to be a little bit more pro-business and think differently on how we approach things. And so at that time, 10 years ago, we weren't doing well. The city was not growing. We were pretty stagnant, quite frankly, over the last 30 years. And that's a combination of poor leadership, poor planning. It literally was apathy from the business community, quite frankly, that had created systemic problems that we needed to address. And so we needed more business-minded people representing us on the city, county level. We needed just to be more aware of what was going on and engaged in the political process, which helps. I mean, if you think about what government does on a day-to-day basis, they can help you or hurt you. And
Right.
if you're running a business, we have a significant, as a whole, everybody thinks the Southeast has got cheap labor, cheap taxes, cheap land, everything. But in reality, that's not the case, especially in capital cities. Capital cities are unique, and we have high taxes, and it keeps businesses from looking to this area. And so we've had a challenge over the last 10 years, but I think we're in a good spot now, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I can see where being in a capital city could definitely have its benefits, but some challenges along with it. And it's something that piqued my interest is when you'd mentioned some of the challenges when you came into this position 10 years ago. So it kind of boiled down to apathy from the business community. I thought that's an interesting approach. Could you talk a little bit more to that?
Yeah, I mean, well, a lot of the folks that were engaged in the chamber, now we had a stagnant board. I've said it over and over, so this is not the first time I said it. We were male, pale, and stale.
Yeah,
We were a functioning board that was doing the same things we've always done, and it was not, in my opinion, wasn't healthy. We weren't creating an environment where new people wanted to come.
right. Yep. It sounds like your chamber was the traditional chamber of 10 years ago, the male, pale, and stale.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
so,
We were a traditional chamber, but traditional in the sense that 35 years ago we split economic development out. We're a chamber that does not have the local tourism industry at all. That's a whole separate group. And my predecessors, and there were reasons why they did it. I wasn't around, so I don't want to criticize them for it. But the long-term impact was, what is a chamber that does not have economic development, that does not have tourism? What do you do? And how do you make yourself not relevant, but how do you make yourself essential to a community that was really down on itself and not growing? It was stagnant.
yeah,
And so it was, interesting back in 1950, Richmond, Virginia, and Raleigh, North Carolina, Charlotte, Atlanta, Columbia, Austin, Texas, were all about the same size.
yeah,
And then you fast forward to 1980, and Richmond, Raleigh, Columbia, three capital cities in these southern states were all the same size. And all of a sudden now Columbia hadn't changed, the same size they were in 1980, and Richmond and Raleigh are totally different. Not that I want to be, and I don't think anybody in Columbia wants to be those other cities. It's how do we attract and retain talent here in Columbia, and how do we make ourselves a draw? And
yeah,
a lot of the things that we were doing systematically were just not good for business.
yeah,
High taxes, not innovating, and really not doing a whole lot to change it. We were
yeah,
doing everything that we were doing, and so our hope, my hope, and the team that we have was like, all right, we can be the best Columbia. We want to be the best Columbia, but we don't have to sit and do things just because it's the way we've always done it. And it was maybe 2 months into my tenure, I was like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this event? Or why are we sending stuff out? Well, that's the way we've always done it. I'm
yeah.
like, that's got to stop.
It's the wrong answer, right?
Right. I'll ever hear that again. But changing the leadership, and then also you got to have, if you want to attract new businesses, they got to feel like they're have a route to be participating. They got to be participatory. We need them involved, but we need to change. We need to have a board that reflects the community, both not just demographically, but also we need a different. At one time we had a board of. Our idea was diversity was have six different bankers sitting around
Right.
the boardroom. Well, that's not. yes, we diversity in banks, but we don't have diversity of thought, and we don't
Right.
have diversity of industry. And so we've been very, very deliberate in making sure that our community feels like we're reflective of them, but more importantly, that we appreciate in their ideas and their thoughts, and how do we be a little bit more progressive.
Yeah. I like those thoughts and your comments around seeing the other similar sized cities grow and develop in that time period and to have Columbia stay about the same as it was in the 80s. Anytime something stays stagnant, life kind of ceases to happen, right? Things start to die off a little bit. And to be able to invigorate that again, get it going, that's the key to be able to don't let things become stagnant, right?
Right, right.
Yeah, keep
And
life
that's
flowing.
hard. But that's where the chamber can really, is that the chamber's responsibility by itself? No, absolutely
No.
not. There are no single person that can do anything. And so you got to work with your city leadership and your business leadership, um, and the triple P's really do work, not just in development, but also with ideas and how to get things moving along. And so we're in a different spot than we were 10 years ago. It's pretty amazing. Our growth in South Carolina has been substantial since the late 90s and early 2000s. Charleston and Greenville and south of Charlotte's coming this way. And so we just have not been able to capitalize. But we've finally been able to do so. And we're seeing significant 4 or 5 times annual growth of what we saw 2 or 3 years ago, which is nice.
That's
It's fun.
awesome. Well, that's a great setup for our conversation today, giving us kind of the background on Columbia, how things are sitting, the role of the chamber right now in Columbia. And as we focus our conversation today, we'll focus on some of these maybe more unique approaches, ways you guys approach things versus maybe the way some other chambers approach things. And I hope that there's some key elements out of this conversation that others can take and scale to their chamber and be able to maybe implement some of these things to invigorate life in their communities as well. And we'll dive in much deeper on this conversation as soon as we get back from this quick break.
Hi, I'm Joe.
And I'm Rose.
And we're the founders of At My Community, a mobile app that can be customized to meet the unique needs of your Chamber of Commerce.
When we started At My Community, we envisioned a tool that would help communities thrive by simplifying communication and enhancing engagement. Chambers of Commerce face unique challenges, and we're here to help you tackle them.
At My Community helps the Evergreen Area Chamber of Commerce to create an app that keeps tourists informed even when their office is closed. They provide 24/7 access to local business information, which helps support the local economy and community engagement.
In Rocky Mountain House, we helped Rocky Chamber create an app with dynamic itineraries and digital resources for tourists, increasing local business engagement. The app has become an essential tool for the community, promoting events and boosting visibility for local merchants.
Today, we empower more than 200 chambers of commerce, campgrounds, and RV resorts to streamline communication, informing members about events, sharing business updates, and providing a digital hub for the community, all in one convenient app.
When you partner with At My Community, our team works closely with you to create an app that meets your chamber's unique needs. As your community grows, our app evolves with you. We are here to ensure you engage effectively with your members and streamline your operations.
Schedule a demo today at atmycommunity.com.
We can't wait to meet you.
Chamber leaders, I know each of you works daily to boost your local economy and take your Chamber of Commerce to the next level. But let's face it, it takes funding, and lots of it. You need to know Resource Development Group. For 3 decades, they have been the premier economic development fundraising consulting firm dedicated to helping chambers of commerce and economic development organizations like yours thrive across the United States. Their expert team specializes in crafting customized fundraising strategies that drive tangible results so you'll be able to fully implement your community advancement and economic development strategies. Imagine having a partner who strives to understand your community's unique needs, brings national best practices to bear, and has the proven experience to secure millions of dollars in funding. Resource Development Group has successfully guided countless chambers of commerce in creating vibrant, sustainable economies. With their comprehensive suite of services, from campaign planning and execution to investor engagement management to best practice studies, RDG takes the guesswork out of fundraising. You'll receive personalized support and innovative solutions that make a real impact. Don't just take my word for it. Chambers of Commerce and EDO executives nationwide have praised RDG for their dedication, professionalism, and impressive track record of raising over $2 billion for their clients. Ready to see what Resource Development Group can do for your chamber? Visit them at rdgfundraising.com to learn more. Elevate your community, strengthen your chamber, and unlock new possibilities with Resource Development Group by your side. They build organizations that build communities. All right, Carl, we're back. As I mentioned before the break, we're going to focus most of our conversation today around kind of the unique approaches that the Columbia Chamber takes to your chamber work versus maybe that of what some other chambers do. And in your explanation and background of the Columbia Chamber, I think you've hinted on several of these things, from the business apathy and kind of changing that mindset to the board makeup. But what are some of these other approaches or mindsets that you guys are taking there in Columbia to really see some of that growth that you guys are seeing and to maybe energize some other chambers as well and kind of spark some ideas for them?
Listen, let me just say, we are not unique, and I ain't a smart guy. I want to set the record on this straight, because what I did when I got here was I had the privilege of having fresh eyes. Fresh eyes is a gift.
Yeah.
When you can come into an organization and you bring, or whenever I hire new people, is really dig in with them to see what they see, because we get blinders on. And I guess my biggest fear is complacency. And complacency is a cancer. It's a form of cancer that can erode an organization. And so I ask and spend a lot of time with new board members or new staff members or new partners, say, hey, what do we need to be doing differently? What do you see that we're doing that we're missing? But so being always trying to find new ways to do things, I think, is critical for any organization. The problem we have in chamber world is we're always underfunded. We're few staff, and the easiest thing to do is what we've always done.
Mm-hmm.
Creativity takes time and energy, and you have to spend hours talking to folks, and that's hard. But I think the end result is a better product for your partners. And we're seeing that today. How do we continue to morph, even though we've had a good run the last 3 or 4 years? What do we need to do differently? And I think taking steps back and really sending surveys to our partners and asking the right questions, being on the phone and talking to them all the time, or, all right, this is good. Is this working? But their engagement is critical.
Yeah.
And however we can find, I can't say we have figured it out yet at all. But we are striving every day to make sure that we stay in front of the curve. And businesses, the chambers are in these unique spot because we have to understand politics. We have to understand the business and economics and accounting and law and all these other things that we have to think about on behalf of our business partners. But we didn't go to school for any of this stuff.
Right.
Right? We're learning on the streets like everybody else. But we need to lean on our partners to figure out what they need. And for us in South Carolina, we're seeing this huge post-COVID surge of population and businesses coming in. And great, what's our biggest issue? It's workforce. How do we help our partners? How do we help train and think about the workforce next week, next year, 5 years, 10 years? So it's getting the mindset of let's be a community builder. Let's think about thinking long-term strategies on how we can be a player in not just the here and now, but later. It's tough.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the market throws a curve at us and we're not expecting it. We've just got to alter our thought. I hate the word pivot after COVID,
Yeah.
but I'll use that word. We've got to be always ready to think differently, which is a struggle. But for us today, here and now, we landed a very large OEM in Columbia that's going to be producing a automobile, and they need 4,000 workers by next year. And how do we ramp up? Because we know when a new shiny object comes to town, you're going to see folks leaving one job to go to another. And we got to find the workforce. And so we got to really dig in to think differently on working with our local school districts, our state government for incentive purposes on retraining folks, getting more high school kids into the workforce, work-based learning opportunities for our kids. It's a whole new world. We weren't thinking about this 4 years ago.
Yeah,
we are now.
Yeah, and there's a lot of focus right now among chambers on workforce. I mean, it seems like you mentioned that P word, pivot. You know, I think we can go the rest of our life without having any unprecedented pivots happening in our life, right? I mean, at least not calling them those. But yeah, to be able to see where these needs are, and there's been, you know, this mass exodus of the workforce, and when you are looking for that growth and revitalization and trying to spark that energy into the workforce, well, where do you find them? How do you retain talent that you already have in the community? And especially when everybody's, you know, kind of vying for this attention as well. That it is a unique problem, and chambers are poised perfectly to address it. So,
well, addressing is one thing. I mean, we've also got to embrace what our partners need, and they see us as a resource. And big companies typically don't need us to help them with their workforce issue. I mean, they've got resources, they've got staff, but it's the second tier, third tier companies that struggle so much, and they need us because they don't have the depth and they don't have the understanding of all the things that go into it. And so to be a resource for them, but also learning from our larger partners to say, hey, how are y'all doing things that we can help teach others to do? It's not, again, we're not creating new products. We're just trying to be dot connectors and say, hey, how can we learn from one, teach another? And it really helps the overall community.
That is an interesting thought, because I've heard a lot of chambers talk about when that, you know, big factory opens up, you know, a big major employer comes to town, and they're wanting to know, you know, we need, like you said, 4,000 jobs filled. Can you guys help supply that? But in reality, those big companies come in and those jobs will flock to them, but they're going to leave their current position. So that second tier is really, it's like, yes, we can help you find the workforce there, but you go to work overtime trying to find the workforce to fill the backside. So that's
it is truly robbing Peter. Is robbing Peter to pay Paul, and it's the mindset. All right, understand that there's going to be fluctuations, but we need to. And that's 4,000 jobs doesn't seem like a lot to some people that are, you know, in the Dallas area that's growing that many people in a month, or whatever. For us, think about housing and the impact it has on the housing, on the traffic, on the schools. What is that? If we bring in 4,000 new people, is that 6,000 kids we've got to start educating, and where are we going to put them? So the overall thought process, we have to be, we're in a unique position. All chambers are, that there's no other entity that can bring the private sector with the public sector to sit down and find opportunities and long-term strategies on a lot of these issues. You know, we asked for years and years, we relied on government to fix problems. And we're asking elected officials to do things more than we've ever asked them to do. But we as a chamber can provide a lot of resources to help assist, find folks that are experts in their field that work in your community, and sit them down. Let's have dialogue. But these community problems are long term. They're not going away tomorrow. But we got to be thinking about them today, and building those relationships and having those relationships with both public and private partners really are beneficial.
Yeah. So the thought keeps coming back to me about the comment about the apathy of business
Yeah.
owners and your comment about elected officials just now. Elected officials definitely have their place, right? I mean, it's important to work with them and to have the advocacy approach and everything, but they don't have the same kind of skin in the game as a business does on Main Street, right? Who's relying on this to feed their family, to for their employees to feed their families. They've got skin in the game. So to be able to get those businesses engaged in helping to find, those the employment to help solve some of these problems that pop up in communities, to really rely on that business community, I think is the key, and where chambers help convene, and you're convening with the elected officials and everything as well. But really leaning on those that have the biggest to lose and the most to gain, really, by the success in the community. So I think you hit the nail on the head, whether you meant to or not. I don't know.
Well, the hardest thing to do is when you hit apathy, the apathetic feeling
Yes.
is re-engagement and finding hope and that things can get better. And it's, if you're a small business that has 10 employees and you're barely eking out a paycheck, or you're worried about meeting payroll every 2 weeks, it's like, all right, do I really have time to think about regulatory relief? I feel it every day. I see it. I have to have staff to deal with it, but they don't have. So you've got to really educate them on how we can make things better. They got to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And so rebuilding's tough. Maintaining is tougher, but I promise it's better than the alternative.
Yeah. So what's your approach with your partners, as you guys call them there in Colombia? What's your approach with partners to help get them engaged, to step away from that apathy and to really buy in? I know you had mentioned before surveying and listening to them, seeing what their needs are, and I know other chambers are going to hear that and say, nobody opens our surveys, nobody opens the emails. So how do you do that? How do you get that feedback? How do you get them to step away from the apathy and to really lean into that engagement?
Well, you have to have multiple redundancies, right? I mean, there's no, the open rate on those surveys are pretty abysmal, but it has to be done at different levels. So we try to have meetings every year or every month that are opportunities to engage the public sector, private sector, have not just talking about politics, but projects that are coming, and then making sure that we're asking questions while we're with them. Have open dialogue times for them to voice their opinions, what's going on, what's good, what's bad. But at all of our events, our goal is to ask questions of what we need to be, what do we need to know to help y'all? And as soon as you start that dialogue and you do it over and over again, they actually start to believe it, which is good. That's what we want. Yeah. But it's not just mention it one time and expect a flood of phone calls or emails. No, that doesn't happen. But it's got to be built in to the process of every month, our monthly meetings, our quarterly meetings, small. I mean, but you got to put your money where your mouth is. If you really are trying to focus on small business, all right, let's create a new group dialogue just for small business. What do y'all want to hear? What do y'all need to do? But let's just focus on the area that needs focusing, and that's helped. That's served us well. The other is, and this is the hard thing about. I've got the best staff, best team in the world. I love them. They are fantastic. But we also, day in and day out, are in a bubble.
Yeah.
They don't have to go in, clock out, and they don't have to deal with regulatory issues, and they don't have to deal with a lot of stuff. But we think we do. Or more importantly, we think we know what our partners want. And quite honestly, the worst thing we can do is think for ourselves. We need engagement, and that's the key. And I remind our board this all the time. Look, we need y'all to tell us, don't expect us to be, what did Ronald Reagan say? I'm here for the government. I'm here to help.
Yeah. That's what you don't want to hear. Yeah.
Right. I can't pretend to know exactly what the issues are in the business, I need them to tell us. And so, but we got to have that open dialogue. We got to, it's repetitive. I spend hours on the phone, but it's important to make sure that we have people that we can call to give us straight answers of what we need to be working with, and making sure that we're providing that ROI to our partners.
Yeah. If I could summarize it, I'd say just stay curious on what those
Yeah.
needs are for your partners. And you mentioned, you're not going to get that flood of phone calls or emails, which is probably a good thing, because that wouldn't really be sustainable either. You couldn't address them all at one time. It might help in seeing some trends, but being curious and in those personal interactions, if you're at a luncheon or if you're, visiting some members, just as you talk to them, what are some of the challenges you're facing, and have it be a genuine conversation versus just greeting them, thanks for coming to the luncheon. Yeah, you can elevate that short conversation so much higher by being curious.
Well, folks think, if they get the first phone call from me, and I only call them once a year when their renewal's up,
Right.
I mean, there's not a whole lot of authenticity in that call, right? I mean, they know exactly what I'm up to. So it's important to have multiple contacts just to know, hey, we really do care. We really are inquisitive. We want to know how we can be helpful. And those, again, it's all relationships, and building out those relationships are better for us as a chamber, but long term, it truly helps not only the chamber, but it helps our retention. It helps across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Carl, as we begin to wrap things up, I wanted to ask for the chamber listening, who's wanting to try to take their chamber up to the next level. You've shared some great insights, but do you have any actionable maybe tips or action items that you can share with those listening to maybe try implementing at their chamber to spark some life and step away from the apathy?
Well, I think there are different communities. You meet one chamber, right? Everybody's different. Every community is different. But I think when you find, we're not good at everything. We don't know everything. And so I think we try hard to stay in contact with partners, ask them what we need to be doing. I don't have a silver bullet. I'm just making this up as I go, quite honestly. But I think over time, people see us as a resource that they need, and they feel like if we don't know the answer, it's okay, but we're going to go figure it out and try to find the answer. And I think companies and people are very happy with that answer. It may not work for us. If we'll try new things, we're not saving the world. We're not curing cancer. We're not doing brain surgery or anything like that. We try different things all the time. It works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. It could be a timing issue, just could be whatever. But don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't hesitate, because at the end of the day, we're going to be doing this tomorrow, and we'll try something else. So I think too many people try not to take risks. I like taking risks, even in a little old nonprofit that we run. I think it's worth doing.
Yeah.
And then again, it goes back to my biggest fear, which is complacency. So taking risks helps alleviate a little bit of that complacency.
Absolutely. Find some comfort in the discomfort, right?
That's right.
So you mentioned that you're just trying to figure it out as you go, but I'd say that the key element to that is taking the feedback. So as you implement new things, you're staying curious, getting that feedback, and that tells you, that's your guide as to what's working, what's not. Well, I like asking everyone I have on the show, as we look to the future of chambers of commerce, how do you see the purpose of chambers going forward?
I think the best years of chambers are yet to come. I recognize them, why they were created years ago, and the value, that proposition that they've offered in years to years has just been B2B. And I don't think that goes away. What I do think, though, as businesses in this environment that we're in right now, political environment, world environment, whatever, chambers have this unique opportunity to really help define their communities for generations. And what the stuff we're working on today may not come to fruition for 10 to 15, 20 years. but being at the table and helping solve these critical problems are important. And there's no other group. If you look around, who's going to be there? Well, it's got to be the chambers. And it may be uncomfortable at times. It may be not fun, but at the end of the day, is it necessary? And businesses want to go and relocate, or they want to flourish where they can feel like they want to live, work, and play. Their employees want to live, work, and play in a community that's vibrant, that is in an atmosphere that can make money, but they have a great quality of life. And so chambers are going to have to be at the tip of the spear in creating some of these long-term strategies in their communities to fulfill the needs of business. So it's going to be a fun challenge for the next few years. I'm excited. It's new, different. Every day's different.
Yeah.
So it'll be fun. But I think looking at your book of work today, knowing that it's got to change, what can you live without? What can you live without doing? And what's the best ROI for your partners, your members, or whatever? That's what's going to have to drive you. So
yeah. What I find super interesting about chamber work is it is never ending. You know, once you solve one problem, there's always going to be another thing to address. So never is the work of a chamber going to be complete. So it's
that's right.
Job security there. So, well, Carl, for listeners who may want to reach out and connect with you, what would be the best way that you'd have them reach out and contact you if they had any questions about what we talked about?
You can hit our website at columbiachamber.com or see Blackstone at columbiachamber.com. Will get right to me. So love to, if you ever have a question, if I can be a resource, let me know.
That's perfect. We'll get that in our show notes for this episode, but appreciate you taking some time to be with us today here on Chamber Chat Podcast, share some of the approaches you guys have taken and really, diving into engaging with your partners and helping them step away from that apathy. That's so critical and keeping the work of chambers moving forward. So thanks
absolutely. But don't be afraid to reach out. I was reluctant when I first got to the chamber of reaching out and asking for help. And call it pride, call it ego, whatever it was. But the best resources for me are other chambers. And, we love the R&D work in chamber world, reuse and duplicate. So embrace that as well, but find a mentor, find a friend at another chamber and pick their brain. It's a huge help.
I love that plug. That's why this podcast exists. Do your R&D. Yeah. Well, thank you, Carl. This has been great, and appreciate spending time with you today and for you carving out some time to talk with us. This has been wonderful. Thank you.
I've enjoyed it. Thanks.
If you are a chamber professional, please subscribe to Chamber Chat Podcast in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify. When you subscribe to Chamber Chat Podcast, new episodes will show up in your podcast app each week as they are released. If you're finding value in this podcast, please leave us a rating and a review in iTunes. But most importantly, please share Chamber Chat Podcast with your colleagues that are in the industry.